The federal shutdown crisis. What's happening with the government and aviation? Welcome to today's special episode. We're now 1 week into a federal government shutdown that's causing real disruptions across the country, and nowhere is this more visible than in our nation's airspace. Today, we're breaking down what led to this shutdown, what's happening with the FAA, and what it all means for everyday Americans. How we got here. The federal government shut down at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time on October 1st, 2025, after Congress failed to pass funding legislation before the September 30th deadline. This marks yet another chapter in the ongoing budget battles that have become all too familiar in American politics. According to the Congressional Budget Office, approximately 750,000 federal employees are being furloughed each day during this shutdown. These aren't just statistics. These are people who work for agencies like the National Park Service, NASA, the FDA, and many others who suddenly find themselves without work and facing uncertainty about their next paycheck. But what actually caused this breakdown? The shutdown appears to stem from deep disagreements between Democrats and Republicans over budget priorities. One major sticking point has been President Trump's use of what are called rescissions, the power to cancel or reduce already appropriated funds. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has expressed concerns that any Democratic negotiating wins in the budget could simply be undone through these rescissions, making it difficult to reach any compromise. House Democrats attempted to negotiate a bipartisan funding continuation with the Trump administration before the deadline, but those efforts ultimately failed. As of Monday, the Senate has rejected multiple funding bills, with no signs of an imminent resolution. Crisis, air travel, and chaos. Now let's talk about what's arguably the most immediate and visible impact of this shutdown: the crisis at the Federal Aviation Administration. The FAA's website currently displays an ominous message. Due to a lapse in funding, the FAA will have limited communications but will send any significant safety messaging. That's government speak for, we're barely operational. Here's what's actually happening in the skies. Air traffic control facilities are closing due to short staffing. On Monday night, the air traffic control facility responsible for Nashville International Airport closed for 5 hours because they simply didn't have enough controllers. This was the second FAA facility to close in just 2 days due to staffing problems. Think about that for a moment. Air traffic controllers are the people who prevent planes from colliding in midair and guide aircraft safely to their destinations. These facilities closing isn't just an inconvenience, it's a serious safety concern. The ripple effects have been immediate. Travelers at airports from Hollywood Burbank in California to Nashville in Tennessee have seen arrival boards filled with delays and cancellations. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy has acknowledged the situation publicly, but there's only so much the administration can do when the fundamental problem is lack of funding. Air traffic controllers are considered essential personnel, which means they're required to work even during a shutdown. But here's the cruel irony: they have to work without getting paid on time. Controllers are set to receive only a partial paycheck on October 14th for work performed before the shutdown began. Imagine showing up to one of the most stressful jobs in America, where lives literally depend on your focus and alertness, knowing you're not going to be paid for it. Impact on federal workers and services. The shutdown extends far beyond aviation. The National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. shut its doors on Saturday, October 4th. Federal parks and museums across the country are following suit. Each federal agency has its own contingency plan for shutdowns, determining which employees are essential and must work without pay, and which are furloughed entirely. Emergency response personnel for wildfires and other disasters are still working, but many routine government services have ground to a halt. For small businesses that depend on federal contracts or approvals, this creates a cascade of economic problems. For military families, there's uncertainty about when benefits and services will continue normally. And for the roughly 750,000 furloughed workers, there's the very real question of how to pay bills and buy groceries when their paychecks have stopped. the political stalemate. So why can't Congress and the White House just work this out? The answer lies in some fundamental disagreements about how government should function. The rescission issue has become a major sticking point. President Trump's use of this power means that even if Democrats negotiate specific programs or funding priorities into a budget deal, those provisions could potentially be rescinded later. This makes it extremely difficult to negotiate in good faith when you can't trust that the deal will stick. There's also the broader question of budget priorities. What should the government spend money on? How much? And where should that money come from? These aren't just technical questions. They reflect deep philosophical differences about the role of government in American life. Recent polling from The Economist and YouGov shows that Americans are assigning blame for the shutdown, and it's having political consequences. The survey indicates that Trump's job approval has hit new second-term lows among certain groups, and Democrats appear to have a lead heading into the 2026 midterm elections. Negative sentiment about the economy is also prevalent. The House of Representatives is currently on what's called a district work period, basically a recess, through October 13th. The Senate has been holding votes on funding bills, but so far nothing has passed. Monday's votes failed again, meaning the shutdown continues into its second week with no clear end in sight. Real-world consequences. Let's bring this back to what it means for regular people. If you're planning to fly anywhere in the coming days or weeks, expect delays. The FAA's staffing problems aren't going to resolve themselves overnight, even if funding is restored tomorrow. If you work for the federal government, or a contractor that depends on federal spending, you're facing real financial hardship. While federal workers typically receive back pay after shutdowns end, that doesn't help you pay your rent or mortgage today. If you're a small business owner waiting on federal permits, licenses, or contract approvals, you're stuck in limbo. The agencies that process these applications simply aren't functioning at normal capacity. And for all of us, there's the broader concern about government dysfunction. When our elected representatives can't perform the basic function of keeping the government funded and operational, it raises serious questions about the health of our democratic institutions. What happens next? The truth is, nobody knows for certain how long this will last. Previous shutdowns have ranged from a few days to over a month. The longest government shutdown in U.S. history was 35 days, from December 2018 to January 2019. What we do know is that eventually the political pressure becomes too great to sustain. As more Americans feel the direct impact of shutdown, through flight delays, closed national parks, delayed tax refunds, or whatever services they depend on, politicians face increasing pressure from their constituents to resolve the impasse. The question is whether that pressure will be enough to bridge the fundamental policy disagreements that caused this shutdown in the first place. Transportation Secretary Duffy and other administration officials are making the case for why funding needs to be restored. Opposition leaders in Congress are arguing for their priorities. And somewhere in between, there needs to be a compromise. The bigger picture. This shutdown is happening against a broader backdrop of American political polarization. We've seen an increasing number of government shutdowns over the past few decades, and they've generally been getting longer and more acrimonious. This isn't normal for a stable democracy, and it shouldn't be accepted as just how things work now. Other wealthy democracies don't regularly shut down their governments over budget disputes. They have mechanisms to continue functioning even during political disagreements. The fact that we keep ending up in these situations suggests there's something structurally wrong with how we're approaching governance. Conclusion. So where does this leave us? 1 week into a shutdown, with air traffic control facilities closing, 750,000 federal workers furloughed or working without pay, and no clear resolution in sight. For the FAA specifically, Secretary Duffy has deployed a new Notice to Airmen system to provide critical alerts about airspace changes, and the agency is prioritizing safety messaging even with limited communications. but Band-Aids can't fix structural problems. What we need is for our elected representatives to remember that governing means making compromises, even when it's politically difficult. The consequences of failure aren't abstract. They're flight delays in Nashville, unpaid air traffic controllers, closed national galleries, and uncertainty for millions of Americans. As citizens, we have a role to play too. We need to hold our representatives accountable, not just for standing firm on principles, but for finding ways to govern effectively even when they disagree. Democracy requires both conviction and compromise. That's our show for today. Keep checking reliable news sources for updates on the shutdown. And if you have travel plans in the coming days, make sure to check your flight status early and often. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back with more updates as this situation develops.